If you do have a question, if you could type it into that Q&A down there, and we'll go from there as far as if there's questions, specific questions. I've got some that were sent in for the different panelists for the different ideas, but I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Dan Quigley. I am the vice president at Kirkpatrick Management Company. My job is I am the operations guy or in charge of the association division. So you guys all, I appreciate you. You're my boss, and I work for you. One of the things that I do usually at the beginning of these is just to give out my cell phone number. My cell phone number, because you guys pay for my cell, is 317-847-0016. And here's the deal. If you can't find your manager and you need to get a hold of somebody, there's an emergency, there's a something just isn't right, get a hold of me, and we'll start working on it together. Cynthia knows that we'd had to do some different things back and forth to try and solve some problems that were happening, and we needed a little more communication and that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. I'll also say it again at the end of the meeting, but it is something that you guys can use. We'll start off. I'm going to introduce Steve Earnhardt. Steve Earnhardt is in, I believe, his 29th year at Thrasher Bushman Vocal. They are a firm that we have used a long time. They specialize in one of his specialties. They have lots of specialties, is HOA laws. So he is one of the best there is at that, and he's going to be able to answer some different questions throughout. I'll start with a couple questions. I've got 3 questions that were sent in for him. And one of the things is it starts off, we know a little bit about the Corporate Transparency Act. Anybody on a board of directors this year is going to have to sign up on the Corporate Transparency Act. And Steve, I didn't know if you had a second, maybe you could talk about that and what, do the board members have to sign up? What's it look like if we don't sign up, or what do you know about that at this point?
Yeah. This thing's been floating around out there for a couple of years. Well, more than that, I think it started under the Obama administration, and the government has kind of kicked the can down the road over and over for implementing it. And they finally said, okay, well, we're done kicking the can down the road. We're going to force everybody to do it. And so now the ramifications of what they did with this thing are coming to light. And while congressmen and things like that want to try to lay blame on administrative agencies, it's really quite clear that unless you're a 501c3, and very few homeowners associations are 501c3s, you're going to have to comply with it. When they first came out and warned us that we were going to be faced with all the reporting requirements, we took a more conservative approach than some of our fellow attorneys, and we thought once the significant reporting issues came to light, there'd be a big scramble to put an end to it. And right now, CAI has an action pending. I believe it's in Virginia to try to enjoin the enforcement of the law. And then also there's a case in the Fifth Circuit right now where it's been briefed. It wasn't done by CAA, it was done by another group, and they're seeking to enjoin the enforcement. But here we are, mid-October, and thus far there is no expectation that we'll get an order before December 31st. So we're now telling our clients, yep, you're going to need to come into compliance and you're going to have to report. Quite frankly, I know a lot of people are not happy about it and they're upset, but you're not giving the government any new information. You're not telling them that which they don't already know. What they don't know is how to connect the information you've already given them to a company. And that's what the CTA is doing. So you're telling the government, this is me, I'm affiliated with this HOA, and here's my passport that you already gave to me, so they can connect those things. I may disagree with the philosophy behind it, but that's the thinking.
Okay. One of the board members on here did have a question. Could you explain how the management companies are held accountable under the CTA? And I don't really know that we are held accountable under the CTA.
No, I would disagree that you are. Now, because it's an obligation that's placed upon the business entity. Anything that is created through the Secretary of State's office, be it an LLC, be it a limited partnership, a corporation, S Corp, C Corps, whatever, all those guys have to report. And so while I mean, Kirkpatrick is a company that would be encompassed by it, so I assume KMC is going to be doing a CTA report, but that's different entirely from the HOAs.
We are going to recommend, it's actually not something Kirkpatrick is comfortable managing. So we are going to manage or actually going to recommend a third party. Everybody will get that next week from us as far as that. I do have, and then here's the other question. Let's say, okay, you know what? My whole board says, you know what? not giving the government anything. The whole board quits. At that point, the association goes into a receivership. Is that correct?
It doesn't have to. Um, if that were the case and everybody were to resign, I would tend to first look at the operational documents to come up with a more reasonable and cost-effective resolution. Receiverships are very expensive, and a receivership is not designed to just be an artificial third person running a business. A receivership is kind of a stopgap measure so that you can get from point A, which is chaos, to point B, which is a normal state of affairs again. And so I think probably a better way to do it would be to call a special meeting for an election of new people, and those new people, hey, understand you're going to have to do a CTA compliance. I mean, I got my FinCEN number through the federal government, fairly easy to do. Really, anybody with a professional license the government's got all your information anyway, so I was
Okay.
comfortable.
And Jason Ashley had a question. So the what is the reason for the reporting? Why is this important? Why are they doing? What are they getting out of this? I guess is
Well, yeah, you think of all the sex trafficking that homeowners associations are involved with and the money laundering, so they're going to try to cut down on that.
okay.
Now that really is that was the argument. I liken it more to just Big Brother reaching further in. But yeah, the idea is that because there are so many LLCs out there and there's so many small corporations, um, you're able to belong anonymously to these things. I'm sorry, did I got a little
Okay.
sarcastic there, but yeah, with
Yeah,
these
the views expressed by Steve Earnhardt are not the views expressed by Kirkpatrick Management Company. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
but really,
Never thought about that.
they want to know who's behind each one of these companies. So if there are financial transactions moving among people and among businesses, they want to be able to connect the dots between the people behind company A and the people behind company B. The way it is right now, prior to CTA, all these companies are set up in various states, like the state of Delaware. Lots of folks are incorporated there in Delaware. And so the federal government doesn't have access to those records. And then you spread that across 50 states plus Puerto Rico and Guam. And so what they want to do is stop making themselves work so hard and force you to produce the information so that they can draw the connections among the various companies.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. We'll come back to you here in a minute. I
Yep.
am going to jump over to Kyle Bennett. Kyle is a new business development person for Brightview Landscaping. He's got a degree from Purdue in landscape and horticulture design. He has been with Brightview a number of years. Both it started there, looks like right out of college, left for a little bit and back, I believe. Is that right, Kyle?
That is true. I
That is
appreciate you looking up all that info on me.
yeah. That's why you try to look up something on Kevin McLaughlin. There isn't anything out there. He's like
Yeah.
a ghost. There's too many Kevin McLaughlins out there. So a little bit, couple questions, Kyle. It's budget time. A lot of times the landscaping is the largest part of the budget. So we're looking for little things we can cut here and there. Different things. Could you kind of maybe touch on? What's the deal? Why 30 mows? Why 26 mows? And why 5 rounds what's the belief behind a lot of that stuff? And if you needed to cut costs, is round 5 the most important round for fertilization? If some of these neighborhoods, they're not a $1 million budget. It's maybe a one time a year you can fertilize and that's going to be your best, or kind of, if you don't mind giving a little bit of ideas on that.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you bringing that up. It is, like you said, it's budget season. We're hammering through RFPs left and right. I think I sent out 5 or 6 today. And that's a good question as far as, things to look at to maybe cut out. Um, our general thinking, and I'm just saying landscapers in general, um, is if the grass is irrigated, you're probably gonna need 28 mows. If it's not irrigated, we typically figure on 26. We have some very high standard customers, even of yours, that, they want us to mow every week, that they have irrigation in all their yards. And so a property like that may even have up to 32. So, mows are certainly a good place to look at if you want to try to cut some cost. Um, I kind of keep track at my own house every year. I do not have an irrigated yard, but of course, being a landscaper, I take good care of it. This year I'm sitting on 26 mows right now. But we had a very early spring this year. I actually mowed my yard in the end of March, as really a lot of other commercial properties did around this area as well. So this year's kind of a misnomer. I think just because the spring started so early, but you could always, one way to potentially cut some cost on mows is to maybe start with 26, and then, if we need an additional mow at the end of the season or additional 2 mows, just pay for it separately. And I know, from a budgetary standpoint that, that can be a little bit difficult, but over the course of years, you'll probably save some money. These boards will probably save some money, if they look at it more like that. You brought up the fertilizer. Again, like the general way of thinking in this industry is that non-irrigated turf would need 4 rounds, and irrigated turf is going to need 5. And it's just purely because you're going to burn through more nitrogen over the course of the year, if it's irrigated versus not.
Okay.
So, again, kind of go back to my own house. I only do 3 at my own house. I do the first round that has the pre-emergent in it. And then I do what would technically be considered like the 3rd round in the middle of summer. And that's when I put down my preventative grub control.
Okay.
And then I'll get back to the grub in a second.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that 5th round, that fall fertilizer, that is really the most important for grass. Weeds are one thing, but as far as grass health, that 5th round that goes down once the grass is dormant, November, early December timeframe, that's what helps the grass roots grow. At that point, the grass is, it's still alive, but it's not putting on any more top growth. It puts that energy into bottom growth, and it makes the roots grow deeper, more healthier. And they also store nitrogen, and other minerals other nutrients over the course of the winter. And then that gives you also a really nice green up come spring.
Okay. Yeah, I remember Pat Sullivan back before I got in this business from Sullivan Hardwood always said the best thing to kill weeds is grass. And so,
Yep.
the healthier grass, the less weeds. So, that's really it. That's it for my landscaping. That's my TED talk on landscaping. Everything I got from Pat Sullivan.
Yeah, you couldn't be any more right there. I totally agree. The best way to keep weeds out is good thick grass.
Okay. Grubs. So we talked a little bit about, irrigation and grubs. And so if you've had grubs before, you're pretty much gonna have to treat for them forever, or or is it irrigated versus non-irrigated? What's your thought on a lot of that stuff?
Yeah, grubs are kind of a tricky thing. You know, it, if you've had, there's always going to be grubs. There's always grubs out there, but there's a certain amount that's considered acceptable, per square foot or per 100 square foot. There's a certain amount that's acceptable that you're not going to see any damage, any visible damage. So that's why I say it's kind of tricky. Like I said, in my own yard, I put it down like a midsummer preventative treatment. It's a little more cost effective to do a preventative treatment rather than a curative. Usually the bad thing about grubs is you don't see their damage until late in the summer, and then it's kind of too late at that point. They've already chewed up the roots of the grass, and then that's when you start seeing, grass really burn up. And it's at that point, then you're coming in with a curative treatment. The curative treatments are more expensive to begin with, and oftentimes you have to fix the grass. But it's just to say just because you had them one year, you'll have them the next, or you might have them down the road. That's not necessarily true. And insects are tricky. Almost every white grub that we see in Indiana is a Japanese beetle. And you'll see some years where, Japanese beetles could be really bad. And then, we might go 3, 4, 5 years before Japanese beetles are bad again. So it's,
Okay.
really Mother Nature kind of dictates that.
Okay. So that's what sometimes you gotta just go with the season on that. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to jump over real quick. Kevin McLaughlin's on here. Kevin is in his 19th season with ASAP. I am introducing all these guys. Some of you know him, some of you don't. Kevin doesn't have every property. Kyle does not have every property. They would like to as businessmen. I think maybe their significant others wouldn't like them to, but they would like to have every neighborhood. And Greg, thank you for jumping on. We have got, but they are the Central Indiana's largest lake and pond provider with algae and weed control, fountains and aeration, things. They are your one of your biggest pond companies. They are the biggest in Central Indiana. Kevin, so a couple things. The ponds, and we're always. It's some days sometimes it's a good year, sometimes it's bad. You send out some great information. We appreciate that. We see people walking around and going, trying to treat from sometimes your boats are out there and sometimes you're on the sides. What's the difference on that? And are you still getting treated when you're on the sides, or what's going on with that?
Excuse me, the biggest factor is probably what we are targeting or treating at that point. If we're treating algae or weeds in the pond, 99% of them are going to be from a boat. The biggest thing with algae is, they're all single cells, mixed together, and so they form a mat, but you really need to get the chemical into all those single cells to kill it off. So with our boats, we have like a high pressure hose system on them. So when we shoot out the product to kill off the algae or weeds, it's also breaking it up. And from shore, you just don't really have that capability with the backpack or anything. So if we're spraying like maybe primrose or cattails, like more of an immerse plant or emergent plant, we can do that from shore. And one of the biggest reasons that we do a lot of those from shore is because that way overspray is going into the water. A lot of it targets chlorophyll production. So, you shoot it from the boat out, you're going to kill some of the grass. So we do that going inward into the pond so you don't have that. But in terms of like the algae and weeds, the algicides, those don't do anything to the grass. Some of the herbicides for the submerged weeds underneath the water can, harm some of the grass here and there. Most all of the products that we have are zero restrictions in terms of irrigation, drinking, swimming, fishing. The EPA has such strict guidelines on all of our products because they're going in the water that they are designed to break down within like minutes or hours. So everything that we're putting in is broken down pretty quickly and extremely safe for the water. So.
Yeah, that is a good question, because we'll go to a meeting and they'll start talking about how those people are eating those fish out of that pond. They're blue veins or whatever they're coming out. But you do that. You're not just spraying a Roundup in there. These are
No.
EPA approved stuff that you're putting into the water, correct?
Correct. I mean, they're all designed to, they're all water soluble, so they're not going to go into the fatty cells of the fish or the wildlife or anything like that. So even, we've had people ask us if if there happens to be like a fish kill on a pond, people will say, oh, the birds are eating them, birds are going to get sick. Well, that's not the case. They weren't, poisoned by the chemical or anything like that. Most of the time it has to do with like a dissolved oxygen level fluctuation in the pond. So, yeah, it's not going into the fish or anything like that. Now, I wouldn't eat them anyway, just because,
No.
the retention ponds are pretty gross. I mean, they're basically stormwater drains. So all the drain grates and the neighborhoods and everything from the roads and the runoff and the fertilizers and animal waste, all that stuff ends up going into those things. So, I mean, they're pretty nasty by design, but in terms of like the products and stuff that we're using, they're designed to go into water, break down, and become inert within, usually, like I said, a couple hours to a few minutes on some of them.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, one question, or not one question, but they have you got a neighborhood. They got a couple big ponds. They got one pond in the front that they love. They put a big fountain in there. That comes and goes through the years. A beautiful fountain. But then some people are saying, you know what, we should have put the bubblers in there. What's the? Can you tell me, briefly, does a fountain move the water around at all, or is that really just for looks? I got a fountain out in the backyard that Kelly's going to be really upset when that thing goes because she loves that thing, but it has to go at some point. But the
Yeah.
bubblers are, what's the best thing, or what's the two functions of those guys, if you don't
Yeah,
mind?
it really depends on, shape, size, depth of the pond. But in terms of fountains, obviously they're going to move some water, but it's really minimal in, the grand scheme of the whole water volume of the pond because fountains float at the surface. That's how obviously they produce, the water patterns that come out of them. The motor hangs, roughly 18 inches below it. So it's pulling up water and they're strong. I mean, some of them, are designed to be aerating fountains. So, they're moving, some of them move, 1,200 gallons of water a minute, but it's still basically all surface level water for the most part, or at least the top few feet, which that's going to have the most oxygen in it anyway. And, just from wind movement and circulation of the pond.
Yeah.
So, basically you think of it, if you jump into a pond in the summer, or a bigger lake and you jump in off a boat and you go down, the bottom of it's cold, top layer is, more warmer. You're going to have the oxygen level at the top that's going to be a lot higher than the bottom is. You're going to get that stratification. In terms of like the bubblers, basically what those are, I reference them to like a fish tank effect. You have a compressor that sits on land, weighted air lines that go out to these diffusers that sit on the bottom of the pond. Depending on size, shape, depth, you might have one or six or eight in the pond, and you're circulating. That's forcing compressed air out to those diffusers that have just millions of holes in them. And then basically that creates the bubbles that come up and you're circulating from the bottom up. So you're taking that cold, oxygen depleted layer, mixing it with the other one so that they're basically more in line with each other. You're going to have more of a consistent water temperature, more of a consistent oxygen level throughout the entire pond. So that's the big difference. If somebody's really looking to, work on the health of the pond and things like that, then, a lot of the times we usually recommend, a bubbler system for it.
Okay.
Especially, if they're like, we had a lot of private homeowners that get those because they're big into fishing and things, and they want to make sure that they can give, the fish the best chance, and that will do it. A fountain, we really sell fountains for aesthetics only,
Yeah.
but obviously, like I said, you're going to get some water movement and some aeration from it.
Yeah. Do not take my wife's. Yeah, she likes that in the backyard. We can't do that. I do have a question from Geraldine. Is will cyan bacteria die in the winter without treatment?
Um, yes, I mean it basically, it doesn't have the nutrients that it really needs to survive. Solar warmth is really what produces, that stuff and brings it to the surface level. So, it recedes, basically goes back down to the bottom, kind of breaks down. Because there's been times where we'll see a pond that, has had, cyanobacteria for year, 2 years, and then basically it just gone, and then it's fine for multiple years. So, there's really, it's one of the hardest things in our business is to try and to deal with cyanobacteria because, no one really knows why it shows up, how long it's going to last, and there's really not a good treatment for it. We've worked specifically with local vendors, using products that they say are, designed to, take care of this stuff. We've had them on site running, the tests with us as we put the products in. They've gone back to look at it. We've done 2 or 3 of those with very little results. So, even when we're using the stuff that's specifically designed for it, it's really difficult to clear that stuff up. I always say it's probably works great in a lab, in a beaker, but when you get it out into the real world and you get it into a pond, it's just a whole different animal.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I thought you guys just drove around in boats. You got a lot more bigger words than we've heard so far from Kyle or Steve. So, Kyle, yeah, I don't know what we're doing here, but so one question they've got here, and this one's. I'm just going to read this because I can't understand half of it. So, it
Sure.
says Spencer Grover's asking Kevin, preventing blue-green algae is our biggest problem. We're investigating ultrasound technology, which I thought was only for babies,
Mhm.
and there is a natural phosphate binder that seemed to inhibit their growth. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so we've heard of the sonar stuff. Basically, it's supposed to, as the sonar goes through, they're supposed to break up the cyanobacteria cells. We've not we've not heard, very much, on that in terms of what results you're going to get out of it. Obviously, the manufacturers for it or whatever are going to say you're going to get good, results, but it's the same thing with with the bubbler systems. There's these micro bubble systems that are out there that are, supposed to be able to help with blue green as well. The same thing, we just haven't really, seen any of that work. A lot of people will talk about, putting colorant in the pond to help with blue green algae. I had a private residence that we put colorant in there. We took a sample of their cyanobacteria, mailed it off to North Carolina, got it tested by a manufacturer. Actually, it's local, but their lab is in North Carolina. It's CPRO. They're off of Meridian. And they gave us, recommendations back on what to use to treat it. We put the colorant in, we treated it, and they basically got very little results from it.
Okay.
So I mean, it's just one of those things. Like I said, it's so hard for us because, with almost everything else, emergent plants, cattails, primrose lilies, standard green algae, submersed weeds, we always, this is the issue. Here's the product that we can use. This will take care of it. But when it comes to cyanobacteria, there are so many, things out there that say they'll do it, but I mean, we've done so many treatments and had very little results on a lot of different aspects of it.
Okay. Gee, I thought Kevin, I don't really know Kevin at all. I've known Kevin for like 10 years, but this is the Kevin show. Sorry. Greg, you're up next. I would not want to follow that. Bernhardt's just sitting down and
Yeah.
put his glasses on, starting to text me. He's looking up, he's getting his Wikipedia out, trying to find some
Yeah.
stuff. So Greg, I appreciate you coming on, and you didn't know you were probably coming on till not too long ago, knowing Kevin. He's probably stuck up on a roof someplace. I appreciate that. Rock Lane is Kevin is here, or excuse me, Greg is here from Rock Lane Roofing. Rock Lane Roofing has been in Central Indiana for 40 years, and they are a GAF Master Elite Roofer. And only 2% of the roofers in the United States are GAF Master Elite certified. So it is a big deal for them. It's a big deal. Rock Lane does a lot of work with us, for us, and for you guys as far as working on roofs that are hail damage. They go through and they will replace hail damaged roofs, but they also are very big on maintenance. We use them quite often through maintenance on roofs that they haven't even done anything with. So they're big on roof maintenance. So a couple questions. We got a lot of condo and PUD board members on here. What is the typical, if you've got, a lot of the stuff that you're putting up right now has not been up before, but, so some of these are original Pulte roofs or original Ryan, just the original roofs on some of these condos. How long are we looking for a condo roof to last before, if we're putting together a reserve study, what kind of timeline should we, are we thinking 20 years? What are we getting? And then what's the new stuff going to bring us?
So it just typically depends. Standard, I'd say 20 to 30 years, and it kind of just depends on the orientation, the roofs, face and just the installation. Roofs facing certain, like we all know, the roofing starts to deteriorate on the south and west slopes faster than the other slopes. So roofs can be put on the same time in a whole community, and you'll see other roofs start to deteriorate faster than other ones. So we typically see them last anywhere from about 20 to 30 years. Um, the new shingles we're putting on, it's about the same. We typically tell our communities we work with that we're putting on roofs to put it in the budget to maybe start replacing in about 25 years. And that's because we replace roofs the right way. We replace all flashing, stripped all the roofs down to the roof deck. Everything's changed, and we know that we can get probably around 25 years out of those roofs.
Yeah, we call it roofing, but there's so much more, right? I mean, with your ice
Right.
shield and things like that. So yeah, I appreciate that.
It's a roofing system for sure of
System,
what we
yeah.
put on.
Yeah, it's not just shingles anymore. So,
Right.
a lot of, so these days there's a lot of people coming out there and not a lot, but there's some people out there going to condos and selling more of a service program. We can power wash the black off your roof. We can do the different things like that. You guys do a little bit of a maintenance. I know we have a property in McCordsville where you come out every year and just do a little bit of maintenance just to try and drag them along so they can get to the 25th year, different things like
Right.
that. What kind of maintenance programs do you recommend do you do it on the newer roofs? Do you wait till they're 10 years old? How are you guys looking at that?
Usually the maintenance programs like that one in McCordsville is you see the pipe boots and vents, they start to fail quicker than maybe the shingles would. So let's just say a pipe boot, it has a neoprene collar that grips around the soil pipe, and you'll see those start to crack from UV damage. That typically happens maybe around 10 years after it was installed. Um, so yeah, you want to start looking at maintenance programs maybe around 8 years after it's installed, just to have somebody look over your roof to make sure you're looking good, make sure there's no manufacturer defects up there where you would have to alert the manufacturer where you might be looking at a claim, and just make sure nothing's going wrong out of the ordinary. And then once you hit that 10-year mark, that's when you might see some of those vents and boots start to fail. Recommend having that checked out yearly just to make sure everything still looks good. All the cracked vents are taken care of, and any leak possibilities are taken care of, just to make sure you're getting the full life out of that roofing system.
Okay, all right. See, Kevin, did you notice he used words we could understand through the whole thing, like roofing boots and none of it's Sino, whatever. It sounded like either a transformer or some disease that college kids come home with. I've got what do we do about so a lot of times I know we look at the gutters and look inside the gutters for how much runoff and how much, your shingle, dirt, whatever. Is that an indicator at all on anything? When the gutter guys are going through, do we keep an eye on that? And when that starts piling up, do we need to worry about that? Is that a good sign of anything?
Yeah, you're always going to have some from year to year. There's always going to be some granule loss. Just the condition of the granules on the shingles just get worse year over year, especially with the weather that we have in Indiana, with the freezing and thawing of shingles and the rain, and even just a little bit of hail that might not do damage, but can cause some of the granule loss. So yeah, you always want to keep an eye on it. If you start to see more than what you're usually seeing, that might be an indication that the property was hit by hail, and might need to be looked at and checked to make sure there's not damage up there. Um, but there's always going to be some, but when there's an abnormal amount, there could have been a weather system that comes through that caused that, which could signify that the roof might need to be looked at.
Okay. All right. Well, great. I appreciate that. I am going to go put Greg on hold for a minute. We're going to go back to Steve Earnhardt. We have a couple more questions on the thing that we got. So yeah, it is a question. Karen Flint does ask, will KMC still be writing checks out of the HOA bank account, but the management company is still not accountable? Karen, I don't understand that one, but that is true. It's an amazing thing. I mean, we're the ones, we're the signees. We've got some different things, but the federal government. Now we have our own CTA that we need to fill out for different things as far as Kirkpatrick Management, Rob Kirkpatrick and the Kirkpatrick family. But I think that it is an interesting thing, but we are, there's audits, there's, we have, checks and balances through everything we do as far as our writing of the checks. But I also thought that was interesting. I didn't know why we couldn't just sign something for everybody and then they were fine, but they have a reason for it. But I think one of the questions, Steve, is Cynthia from Canterbury was asking, can you define the points of accountability for board members, specific consequences for board members if something is found amiss in our records?
Yeah, and the CTA talks about, your obligation to disclose certain things. So if you as a board member make a factual misstatement in the reporting, or let's say you don't register through the CTA, there are specific. Now, and everybody keep in mind, this thing's brand new. It's not like we can turn to what the government has done in the past because there's no track record. And I think a fair and reasonable expectation is that there's going to be a long window where the government says, hey, this is all brand new, everybody's learning it. And quite frankly, in the month of December, we're expecting the whole system to come crashing down because of the volume of input going into the system. If you remember when Obamacare first went into place and the whole system crashed and it was down for a long time, we fully expect that to occur in this case. But yeah, there's a it's a penalty. It's a sanction. They're eligible for a fine of up to $500 per day for being in violation, and with an up to imprisonment for not more than 2 years for intentionally misrepresenting filings under the CTA or in not doing it when you should be. But like I said, it's going to be so new in the beginning. We don't expect any type of negative ramifications to arise for a while. And that's just a knee-jerk reaction. I can't point to anything and say that's definitely the way it's going to be approached.
Okay. All right. And so basically there's going to be a form that's submitted, so let's just say, Joe Cochran drops off the board, he moves, that happens all the time.
Yep.
They replace a new board member. That is something where we're going to have to, that is, we've talked about it as Kirkpatrick, having that in our executive minutes every month, just as far as, okay, we've got this going. There's going to be a little bit of a reporting time, right? As far as, I think we have 30 days to change that out if somebody moves.
30 days after any change in that type of thing, any person in control or authority. Yeah, you got 30 days after that to report it.
Okay. Okay.
And if you have a vacancy, you just report that they've dropped off. Then when somebody does come on, if it's 45 days later, then you report that new person coming on.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I see what you're, so there's no rush to get them on there, but when you just got to take them off, take them on. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. There is a question, and I don't know what this is, so I'm going to ask. What's a FinCEN?
Oh, Federal Criminal Investigation Division. So, like with me, I'm appearing on a lot of these things, and so basically the federal government and the FBI can pre-certify me, and they just give me a big long number. And so instead of every time having to put in my name, my date of birth, send a copy of my passport, etc., I just put the FinCEN number on there, and they say, "Oh, hey, it's Earnhardt," and I'm good.
Okay. I think Kevin McLaughlin would have said it with bigger words, but I got you. We're good.
I could have thrown in a couple of heretofore and afters.
There you go. If you could, yeah. If we were paying you by the word, we'd have some stuff in there. I can tell you that much. Steve, I appreciate it. I don't know, but so this has a cost been set? Yeah. What we're looking at right now, we have got a third party that will be doing the CTA reporting for us, and right now the cost is $335 for the association. It's not a huge amount of money. They're going to specialize it. They're going to try and make money by doing a whole bunch of people. So I will have that out to everybody. It's going to be first part of next week. I'm trying to nail down a couple other things. Thank you, Steve. And if you can hang around, we'll probably have some more, I would imagine. And if I keep making fun of Kevin McLaughlin, I might need some representation by the end of the so we'll see how that goes. Kyle, I've got some questions for you. with Bill Holzer saying that the crabapple trees all looking like they're dying. Is this a bad year for crabapple trees?
Any year's a bad year for a crabapple tree if it hasn't been treated with fungicides. You really need to get in there early in the spring, right as the leaves, right at bud break, like right before they start opening up. Spray them once, spray them again once the leaves start to open up, and then spray them a third time after the leaves are fully developed. That's gonna decrease how much defoliation there is, and that's my big word.
There you go.
That's gonna decrease how much defoliation there is in the middle of summer. If crab apples aren't treated, they're always gonna have apple scab.
Okay.
Some of the newer varieties of crab apples are less. They still get it, but they're a little bit less affected by the apple scab. But a lot of older communities, they're going to have some of the older varieties that are very susceptible to it.
So we did some work with Aaron in Hamilton proper years ago with some crabapple trees. I think he went in there. They were so dense that sometimes you got to go and get some of those branches out of there. Helps them with their health a little bit too, or is that just was?
Yes, that's a good point. Just like any fungus, so apple scab is a fungus. Just like any fungus, it's going to grow best in wet conditions. So the more air movement you can get through the canopy of a tree, the quicker it'll dry out. Like in the morning, if there's some dew on it, the quicker it dries out, the better. So yeah, opening up that canopy can certainly help.
Okay. All right. So Kelly had a question on with the warmer weather stretching from mid-March to mid-November. Most of the RFPs are showing 26, and with costly extra mows to cover what is needed for the end of the season. Additionally, if an association wants to skip mows and dry months and not go over the 26, does it need to be addressed on a week-to-week basis? You touched on that a little bit, but I've always kind of thought that the extra mows seem to be about the same costs as the others, I think, aren't they? Or do you have to upcharge on those?
No, I'm only speaking from Brightview's side.
Yeah.
I don't know what every landscaper does, but I've never really seen anybody charge more than a normal mow. I mean, that's what we do. If your normal mow is $500, your extra mow is $500 as well. And then getting back to the week by week thing. Yes, we're actually just dealing with one of your properties today on that they only have like 3 mows left. I think it's Steinmeier Village is the name of it. They only have like 3 mows left. So we were gonna try to maybe not mow this week in order to kind of stretch that schedule out. But the grass needs cut. The weather has turned. It got a little bit of rain a couple weeks ago, so now the grass is really starting to green up again. So our account manager Angie was going to go back speak with Molly and the board to try to get an extra mow or 2 in there. But yeah, I mean it all comes down to communication. If we're looking like we think we might be able to skip a mow or stretch a mow in the middle of summer, then we certainly reach out. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page and nobody gets any surprises.
Okay.
And really the way I said that isn't exactly right. I said skip a mow. What we try to do if we're trying to stretch our schedule out a little bit to save a mow, instead of skipping a whole week and taking another 14 days between mows, we'll try to get it more like 9 or 10. And then if you do
2 to
that,
3 weeks type of
if
thing.
you do that over a 3-week time period, then you save a mow. And then, maybe not have to buy another one at the end of the season.
Okay. All right. One more question, then we'll kind of move on a little bit here. But the question that it's kind of like less filling, better taste, less filling. What about the volcano mounding around the trees, or not volcano mounding around a tree? What's Brightview's and Purdue? Let's go bring out your Boilermaker. Go boiler up. What's your guys' feeling on that?
That's the worst thing you can do to a tree is have too much mulch on it.
Okay.
And you know, not to say that we don't have properties out there that we have too much mulch on trees, but we, if we're going to remove mulch, we need to be able to, you know, charge for it separately. It takes probably 3 times as much labor to remove mulch as it does to add more. We'll get that from time to time. It's typically apartments, really more so than others, where it's an old apartment complex. The mulch is getting up over the weep holes, and they start to have water intrusion into the buildings. That's typically the customer that comes back and, you know, pays for us to remove it. But yeah, that's definitely the worst thing you can do to a tree, in my humble Purdue opinion.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I'm a Butler guy. We didn't even have we didn't have landscape. We had basketball. They so the yeah, because I've been there before when they've had the girdling underneath, and then you almost have to put, at that point you're married to that mulch. You got to kind of put that stuff on top there just to cover the grossness. So yeah, that I've seen that happen way too much, I think. Back to Professor McLaughlin over here. I did have a question. We had a couple bubbler questions, and what was the one? Oh, what grass carp? How do you you guys? I don't remember getting many grass carp from you, but I know they do it out there. What do you guys think on the grass carp? Do you introduce those to a pond? Are they going to help out, or what do you get on those?
We do not. We do not recommend them. They are, you know, a lot of people think if they put grass carp in there, it's going to help with their algae problem, which, you know, is totally not the case. They're called grass carp because they eat some of the submersed weeds down on the bottom. The only thing that they really do to algae is produce more. Obviously, they have short digestive tracts, so as they bring in, you know, eating that food, it's got to go out somewhere, so they're releasing those nutrients right back into the pond. Um, they are very susceptible to copper-based products. Copper-based products are what are used to treat algae. So, you know, it's a twofold. Yes, if you want to put them in there to help with some of the submerged weeds, but you know, algae is one of the most basic things that you're going to get on a body of water. And to be able to treat it, you're going to use some type of copper-based product. So, you know, there's always a chance or a risk that, you know, they could perish from that. Bigger ponds, obviously, they have more room to move away from the shoreline. You know, 95% of the treatments that we do are around the shoreline. Algae and weeds, simple plants that need nutrients and sunlight. You know, around the shorelines, a lot of these ponds have safety ledges. You know, when they're built for safety reasons, for, you know, kids, animals, things like that, they go into it. They don't automatically, you know, fall into deep water. So, you know, that's super shallow. It's usually anywhere between 5 to 10, 15 feet out. Um, and so you're going to get sunlight penetration straight to the bottom in those areas. So most of the growth happens right around the perimeter of ponds. Bigger ponds, the grass carp have more room to retreat. Smaller ponds, obviously, they don't. The bigger they get, the less they eat. You have to restock them about every 3 to 5 years. Um, we don't really know how they interact with you know, the native sport fish species in the pond. So it's not anything you know, that we recommend, you know, putting into them. We don't, you know, they're not native, obviously, to, you know, the United States or anything like that. So we don't like that, and mosquito fish, or, you know, Gambia, whatever people want to call them. You know, we don't recommend that either. For the same reason, you know, you know, you're putting in you know, non-native species into the pond. No one really knows, you know, how it's gonna, you know, take once it gets in there. You know, obviously they're not designed to be in these situations either. So it's just not something that we recommend. You're paying extra for the grass carp when you're already having somebody take care of the algae and weeds for you. So it just never made sense on our end.
Okay. All right. Real quick, we talked a little bit about bubblers. You pretty much leave the bubblers in year round, don't you?
Yeah, those are designed, you know, 365, 24/7.
So that kind of, and so that'll actually prevent a little bit of ice, it's on some of them, but even if it
Correct.
doesn't,
Yeah. Yep.
you're okay with
And
that. Okay.
they have a lot smaller motors in them. They pull very low amperage, so they're usually a lot cheaper to run than a fountain as well.
Okay. This one says if your lake level stays low for a couple of years, would drilling wells keep a level to keep level up help fight the algae growth?
Probably. I mean, that goes back to, just what I was mentioning on, they're super simple plants, they need nutrients and sunlight. Obviously these are retention ponds, they always have nutrients in them.
Yeah.
But the sunlight penetration, that's the big thing. So, the shallower the pond is, or most of the small shallow ponds, regenerate growth very quickly. If you have a bigger lake or whatever, a lot of times you don't see very much growth in it. And that's just, strictly based on, that nutrient and sunlight penetration. So, if your pond is normally, 6, 8 feet deep, and, you lose water and it's sticking around, like that 4 to 6 range, obviously you're going to get a lot more growth happening because that sunlight penetration can go straight to the bottom, even out in the middle, where it's normally not going to happen when the pond level is up.
Okay. And you're a believer in the coloration of the ponds? Do you have a lot of as far as that slowing down the algae growth?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot more people doing that. The theory behind it, just goes back to that sunlight penetration again. You're dyeing it blue, you're reflecting some of the UV light that's coming in from the sun. So you're limiting one of the factors that helps, produce algae and weed growth. So
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. You dumbed it down for us a little this time. I didn't have any, too many syllables on that, so I appreciate that. Hey, Greg, we did have another question for you, and I'd like to introduce, are there many townhomes or condos instilling metal roofs? Have you seen that at all coming through central Indiana? Is that a East Coast, West Coast thing? What do you know
Yeah,
on
you're
that?
not really seeing much of that in Indiana and Indianapolis. What we typically tell people is you put on a metal roof, you're probably hoping to have that for 50 years. But with the hail that we get in central Indiana, even if it's could be pea size, that's going to hit that metal roof, and insurance would only pay for it if it actually goes through that metal. So any type of little hail damage is going to dent that roof, and your metal roof's going to be looking like a golf ball.
Oh,
So
okay.
we typically we'll steer people away from that, but it's become more prevalent in farm homes. But yeah, you're not seeing that a lot in condo communities. So
Okay.
So I always talk about Rockland being a roofing company. I know you guys do a lot of siding and gutters and things. So your siding these days, there's not a lot of just a vinyl going up anymore. I mean, are you doing a lot of vinyl for or are you putting a lot of what's the best, if we're going to redo a whole building? I got a neighborhood in Broderville that they're always talking about, um, and I think Kent's on here, but they're always talking about doing new siding, as far as getting rid of the vinyl, putting something on there. What would, if you lived there and you were on the board, what kind of siding would you put up there to last and be the best down the road?
we're still putting on a lot of vinyl. Vinyl's come a long ways in the last few years just with their
Okay.
designs. And a couple properties that has wood shake on it. They're now making a vinyl shake product that looks pretty close. So they're keeping the appearance of the community, but they're getting vinyl, which is a lot less maintenance. You don't have to paint, you don't have to worry about wood rot. So
Okay.
there's a lot of vinyl options now. That's probably still the most common siding product we're putting on.
How
Hardy's
much?
more like the composite boards. You don't see a lot of those going on condo communities. Just it's more expensive, and then just with the Indiana weather, you're gonna just have cracks and breaks just from the freezing and thaw cycles throughout the
Okay.
winters that we have.
There's some cool products I think a couple years ago we were looking at from you guys, and Kent was, I think, with those insulated vinyl stuff. You put a lot of that up, or is that not quite hit its stride yet?
Yeah,
Where it's
there's a few properties that we've done siding projects and just a few buildings here and there that we're using that insulated product. It has gone up a lot in price in the last few years. I think it's tripled. So that's kind of slowed down the installation using that product. But it's still a popular vinyl product
okay,
that
it
we're
makes
using.
sense. You get the R value plus it's you don't have to
Right,
paint. Yeah, so I get that. That makes more
right.
sense down the road. Okay. So just to talk to the participants, we are going till 7:30 tonight, so we will get through all the questions. And I appreciate these guys sticking around here. We all, I don't know, Paul Kirkpatrick was in Florida last night. I thought he was fine, and I know he's fine, but I think he's probably, maybe the power took out his clock, because he was supposed to be here to answer some insurance questions. So I apologize for that. But I want to ask Steve a couple questions. I'm going to get away from corporate transparency real quick, and we'll come back to it. But it's annual meeting season.
Yeah.
You've got it's hard to get everybody out there and getting them, the getting people out for the meetings. You've got some neighborhoods of 400 people, and you get maybe 40 people come to the meetings, and the HOAs, it basically, I think what we always tell, we're always trying to check the documents and doing, different things. But I think, how a couple different things that are sticklers. Number one, how much of a stickler should we be for the announcement time? Hey, you got to get this out between 30 and 60 days, or 30 and 10 days. Does email count? Where are you leaning on that? Does an email announcement count even? But we do have to put it in US mail. What do you think about the announcement time on those things?
Yeah, it does matter, and you should stick to it.
Okay.
There are mechanisms now, particularly since COVID, that allow a lot more electronic communication than it used to. But again, the not-for-profit corporate statutes that we have in Indiana under Title 23, Article 17, basically say this is the way you're going to do it unless your documents say otherwise. It's a fallback provision. And so there was some discrepancy on whether or not electronic voting, et cetera, was permitted. Now the statutes say, hey, if your documents say do it electronically, you can do it electronically. So that ambiguity has all been wiped out.
Okay. What about and so then we also have we just came from and your colleague Steve Donald helped me out. We came from a neighborhood where you needed quorum of 140. We had 100 people. It was a great meeting, but it wasn't a legitimate meeting. It was not. It was become a town hall meeting at that point.
Yeah.
Unless the documents say so, or you need to pass a budget, we really, we let the not-for-profit act, I think it's not-for-profit act, take over as far as, who chooses the next board. And
right. Yeah. And most of the time your documents will say, hey, you're going to have an election. Staggered terms are always helpful. If it doesn't have staggered terms, what you end up doing, and I've got a neighborhood that just never has met quorum. And so what we do is we essentially have an advisory type of election, and the remaining board members can appoint people to fill vacancies created by people whose term has ended. And so we use that advisory vote to say, this is who we all think should be filling that vacancy. It's not directly an election, but then the remaining board members appoint that person to fill the vacancy. And so you just keep rotating through like that until you eventually wind up with somebody. Kind of my philosophy is, well, what's the downside if we do it wrong? And if there's nobody there who will fill a void or things like that, courts tend to be fairly understanding of that. And if you have one squeaky wheel who says, yeah, well, they didn't notice it correctly. Yeah, you're right, but we had an overwhelming majority of the people there. Or, hey, they didn't have this election held correctly. Well, right, but are we supposed to operate with no directors? And so some of that common sense type thing seems to come in with these disputes.
Yeah, the best business practices. I mean, as long as we try to say that if we think we're doing the right side, or the right thing, and can prove it.
And I have seen squeaky wheels get to the point where they have sought to compel a new election. And the ironic part of that is it takes so long to litigate a case that you're 2 elections past that point when this person would say, go back and have an election in 19, and it's 23 when you get the court order. So
right. Yeah, we've seen that happen. And one question is Jason Ashley's asking, how do they know if they're a 503 type H? What were you saying?
Yeah. What the CTA did was it accepted 501c3 organizations. And a C3 organization is a specific designation that you get from the Internal Revenue Service. And it's a pain in the neck to apply for, and it's a pain in the neck to get.
Okay.
And once you get it, you keep up on your filing so that you never let it go. Rarely, in fact, I'm only aware of one HOA that was a 501c3. Almost all of them are tax exempt under 528. But nobody goes through that process, because if we're already not paying taxes because we're a 528, why would we go through that? People don't donate money to the association typically. 528s are designed specifically for homeowner type associations, where all the income that comes in gets pumped right back out to the benefit of the people who contribute to it.
Okay. Okay. One question that Cynthia's trying to be nice and asking this is basically, what for the CTA. So, the board thinks they've got everything. They've got all their ducks in a row. They've done all these, all the different reporting, different things like that. And what is the CTA looking for? What's the hunt? I mean, there's something that they're looking for. I mean, I think everybody in here, Kirkpatrick's got, we have audits, we have an accounting team. The board does their best. They look through everybody's financials, and we're, best business practice all the way through. Are they looking for willful intent, I guess is the word she used, which I thought was very, very good. Do you know exactly what they're looking for on that CTA?
Yeah, they're looking for transfers of funds below the board. They want to see if there are 35 shell corporations all tracing back to a Turks and Caicos company. They want to be able to track that money through these people. Right now, these companies exist, but the commonality of ownership isn't reflected anywhere in government records. They would have to build that database. And this is essentially building that database. It's the Treasury Department that is doing all this and driving it, and the FinCEN numbers are assigned by the Treasury Department, et cetera. So it is strictly, it's financial based. That's the only thing it's designed to do.
Okay, so it's not really, this isn't a witch hunt. They're not coming to see to make sure that, you put money in landscaping. It was supposed to go into,
They're not going to be looking at your finances at all. It has nothing to do with any of that.
Okay,
You can
good.
embezzle away from your homeowners association, and this is not going to catch it.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not suggesting you embezzle away, but if you do it, it's not going to be not going to be caught by this.
Once again, the opinions expressed by Steve Bernhardt are not the opinions of the Kirkpatrick Management Company or the family. And anyway, so one other thing, you said something about a passport. You're basically just going to be asking for driver's license numbers. Is that correct?
Well, passports last longer than driver's licenses. So,
Okay.
I was like, all the lawyers here in our office, because we applied for our FinCEN number because we have to use it so often. I think everybody here use passports because we don't want to have to update our FinCEN number every 5 years instead of every 10 years.
I see. So I got that. So now I understand that one. That makes some sense. Okay. All right. Look at that. You use FinCEN. That's not quite Kyle, and it's not quite McLaughlin, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all. A couple questions for for Kyle. You've got geese. People hate their damn geese. But we talked about growing the grasses around the ponds to try and, do you have much of that? Do you find much luck in that? Maybe that's also a question for Professor McLaughlin too. But I don't know. What do you think about the tall grass to prevent the geese? Is that working?
Yeah, I'm surprised that question came up, because we don't get that request very often. Everybody wants us to trim all the way down to the water line. But I will say we have a handful of communities that we have left a buffer. Like I want to say it's maybe about 10 feet wide. And I will say, I mean, one of them is over in Carmel. I've had the property for 15 years. And when I pull in there, there's no geese. I think and Kevin may, have some other input as well on this, but I think basically the geese, when they come down and land on the water, you never see them land on land, right? They always land on the water. Well, then when they want to go from the water to shoreline, they don't want to go through the tall wheat or tall grass or whatever you got planted around there. I think the other piece to it too is when they have their babies in the spring, that those, if you leave grass or whatever it is growing around it, if you have it left up high, that gives an area for predators to hide. And so I think the geese are just more apt to not want to have their babies around there. So yeah, I mean, as far as I know, that off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 properties that have us do that, and neither one of them have geese problems.
Okay.
He's 100% correct.
Hey, look at that. I understood everything he said too. That's good. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, but do you mess with that much? I mean, you don't, the geese, you don't do wildlife at all, Kevin. I don't think you don't mess
No,
with.
we don't, but we get that question as well. And, like I mean, 100%, like most people don't want that because, they want the clean edges. They want it looking, as beautiful as possible, but it's 100% correct in that, they want to have easy access in and out of the pond without having an obstacle there where predators can be and they can't see them. So, I mean, it was 100% accurate.
That's interesting. Okay, I did not know that one.
Yep.
All right, see, I don't know everything. Don't tell anybody that works for me. Some of them are on here. I appreciate you keeping that to yourself.
That makes me feel better too, that somebody so smart agreed with me.
I know. I don't know what. Yeah, he's slow playing it now. He kind of he came out of the gate pretty hard, didn't he?
He did.
Um, yeah. So let me see. What about, okay, so I don't know, this might be, for a little bit of, so Kelly Dialer has a question. And maybe Stephen and the professor can ask on this one, but what are the current legal thoughts on whether the legislature will move forward with a requirement for fencing or other safety measures for retention ponds? I mean, unfortunately, we see once a week, once a month, something like that about the cars and the retention ponds, things like that. Do you guys see anything going that way towards the ponds, or is that really just not something we're looking at?
Well, just this week, somebody drove through a fence. I'm not sure how you
Yeah.
possibly prevent that. I think the bigger concern are little kids going down, and I just don't see that happening in the near future. The colossal expense to everybody, I think everybody in the legislature is aware of that, and I could be wrong, but we are still very much a conservative state, and I don't necessarily mean Republican or Democrat, I just mean conservative by nature. And the idea that the legislature would retroactively come in and compel all these communities when they're the ones who make us have the retention ponds to begin with, and then tell us, hey, go out and spend a fortune to upgrade them. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing that I know of is like in Westfield, they have like the 4x4 posts around some of the ponds where you can get to them from like the main road. Like we do a neighborhood on State Road 32. Um, and they have 2 front entrance ponds, and they have like 4x4, posts in the ground, basically going all along like 32 there. And as you start to pull in, once again, I mean, if a car is going fast enough, I don't see how that's going to stop it anyway. But they're the only ones that I know of that have actually done something like that.
Yeah, I wonder if that's local legislation too. That might
I
be
think
something where
so.
either
I
the
think so.
Westfield and Fishers there's a new road by me. They put some big 4x whatever, 8x8, whatever those things
Yeah.
are. They're beastly. You're not gonna get through those.
Yeah, what,
Um,
15 years ago, I got a call late one night. I had an airplane in a retention pond, so I had to jump in a car and go out there.
wow.
Was that
Is
over in Claremont?
Yeah, absolutely.
that you, Kevin?
It's one of the ponds we do, Drake Landing.
Yep, that's
Okay.
what it
Might have
was.
been with- yeah. Okay, question on maybe Kyle and Kevin. Who you guys who losing muskrats? Is that a pond thing? Is that a grounds thing? I know neither one of you guys really mess with that as much, but I know Kevin will call me if he sees muskrats, but usually we get a trapper, I think, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't want to answer for him, but I would guess that it's more of a pond care thing.
Okay.
Because they're in the water. That's, where they build their nest. That's where they're burrowing. underneath the ground. Now, the fixing part of it would probably be more on him, because they dig underneath the ground and basically create sinkholes in those areas. So, but we don't do it. You have to have a special license for trapping. We don't have that, but we do know of some people in the area, that do. So we just always say, hey, we don't do it, but here's somebody that can help you with it.
And Kyle, you're kind of following up afterwards, cleaning up the mess, probably, right? And
Yeah, Kevin's right. We don't have that license either. We'll refer customers to somebody that does that trapping, and then we can fill in the sinkholes once they've taken care of the muskrats.
okay. What about Kyle? There was a question on here about like moles and voles and that kind of stuff. That's mostly, you guys don't mess with that. That's kind of a DIY thing, or we can get a guy to come out there. What do you guys do mess with that at all?
Yeah, again, we have tinkered around with subcontracting that to excuse me, companies that specialize in that and like trapping them. But oftentimes we'll just, if a customer asks us, we'll just send them directly to that company. Just let them work with them directly. Same thing with the geese. There's these geese companies that, they'll use dogs to chase the geese off the ponds and whatnot. We usually just, we'll let our customers just go directly to them if they want. If they do want to go through Brightview, we're more than happy to do that. But yeah, typically we just forward them on our contacts and go from there.
Okay. Greg, we do have a lot of condo owners on here, or boards on here. Couple years ago, we had an ice dam problem that was, kind of it was getting everybody. You couldn't get enough ladders up on the thing. So, do you mind explaining, and cutting you off guard a little bit, but the ice dam is really, once there's an ice dam, there's not much you can do on that, but the preventative time is probably now if we know we've got some ice dam issues. Are you air, are you insulation, or what are you guys usually recommending for ice dams?
So there's a few factors that go into ice dam occurrences. Some of it's building design. There's some bad buildings where there's just a lot of water going to one place. So it's hard to prevent those. But the two factors that we usually address in trying to prevent ice dams is ventilation and insulation. Because what happens when the ice dams are forming is you have heat loss coming into that from your home out into the attic and melting that snow faster than what it should and unevenly. So that melted water goes down, runs down the roof, and once it passes that warm wall, it'll freeze up, creating just a pool of ice and water on those shingles. And shingles aren't made for pooling water. You can have all the ice and water shield in the world, and that's not going to prevent water from leaking in there just because the shingles aren't made for that. So when trying to prevent ice dams, you want to look at your insulation levels, re-insulate, get to 18 to 20 inches. That is now code now in Indiana. And then look at the ventilation, because if you don't have enough ventilation, that can create that heat loss in the attic. So we'll look at the intake soffit vents. We want to bring in that cold air to flush out that heat and flush it out of the exhaust vents on the peak of the roof. So those are the two main things that we look at in communities that have ice damming problems, and try to address those first.
It's probably the time to look at it now too, because you're going to know if you've got it. It's not the newer
Right.
buildings much, but it's some of the older ones and the lack of insulation or a little bit on there. There's a lot of CTA questions that we've got that some of them are questions that we've kind of answered a little bit here and there, but there's no downside to, I guess you could, I think it looks like Keith's talking about for Stephen, who set up shell corps that are tied back to HOA? How can this be detected for CTA violations? I think you would probably know that.
Well,
Maybe
it's not CTA violations. It's essentially money laundering that they're trying to catch. And so they just cast this wide net and said, basically, all right, we want to know who's behind every business in the United States. It wasn't targeted toward HOAs. The unfortunate part is that they didn't exempt us from it. And so we're caught with all of the land ownership LLCs, all of the shell corporations and all that kind of stuff. They didn't target us.
Okay. And the CTA filing, I guess I don't know this one. Is it so what we talked about is the third party we've got doing it is going to do it, and it is the 335, I think, or whatever, and that's for the whole board. It's not per person.
Right.
Is that a yearly thing, or is that going to be, are you doing it now, and then, you know, if your board doesn't change for a couple of years, you don't mess with it?
Right. Yeah. It's only after you establish it, it's changes that you have to report. It's not an annual event.
Okay, so when if you got to change, if you got to report your change, your driver's license goes out or something like that, we go
Yeah,
through.
if you can use a variety of different government, either US government or foreign government issued documents. And once one of those expires, then you have to renew that. So that's a type of change, as well as a board member drops off, a new board member comes on. And one of the questions that we've had, and all of us in the industry, is that, okay, do we have to name our property manager? Not Kirkpatrick, but say, Susie Frazier. Is Susie making enough decisions that she may come on board and have to be on our CTA filing? And quite frankly, all of us in the industry are still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for throwing that wrench in there. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
sorry.
No, I'm not gonna do all that. There was a couple other things we'll come back to, I guess, or we'll answer. What we're gonna do is we're gonna post this recording tomorrow, and I will answer, or we'll send out, if I can't answer, we'll talk to Stephen about answering some of these questions. That maybe come back to the like landscaping, a couple things here or there. One question I had no idea on, and I know I would be able to answer, so I'm gonna ask the professor now. Every fall, pools empty directly into the lake. Is that a problem for the fish and the greenery?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a neighborhood in Carmel. They had a massive fish kill. Didn't know what had caused it or anything, and we come to find out like a week later that one of the homeowners had drained their pool into the pond, and basically, I mean, it wiped out everything in there. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's not, obviously it's not designed to go in there, especially, on a smaller pond. I mean, you're going to displace, a lot of the water with that pool water that's going in there. So
Okay. All right. I think we've got a lot of questions on the CTA as far as unintentional problems, but I think Steve kind of answered that in general. I think they're looking for something different rather than accounting mistakes. It's more of a
Right.
laundering.
It has nothing to do with the way the HOAs manage their money.
Just remember the inappropriate comment he opened with, and we'll remember that's
Right.
really
Money
not too
laundering
much.
and sex trafficking.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, the views expressed by Stephen Earnhardt are not the views of Kirkpatrick Management. Anyway, I always thought we had to have something like that on our collections. We always had to have a little disclaimer, but I didn't know we had to have it on our Zoom calls. So thank you, Stephen, for entering that into the atmosphere. Kyle, Kevin, Stephen, Greg, I appreciate your time. And Paul Kirkpatrick, that was his best report ever since he wasn't here. It's the most we've understood him ever. It's been his highlight of his career, I can tell you that. I've understood everything he said for the first time. But listen, I appreciate your guys' time. This is something different. It's a weird time. We do a lot of stuff during the day, and this is your cutting into your family time and your dinner time. So I appreciate you guys volunteering for this. The participants have stuck it out the whole time. So I'll get back. This is going to be a good recording. We'll put this out. And then I'm going to we'll have the questions answered. The ones, we still got 19 that still have some sort of answer that we need on those. So I'll work on those tomorrow. We'll send it out to everybody on Monday or Tuesday at the latest. But I really appreciate everybody's time. And we will have contact information for all of these gentlemen. We're not putting Paul Kirkpatrick's on there because he stiffed us. So we're going to put Travis Rounds on there, or Travis's thing from Steffi Insurance, because he at least told us he couldn't come. So Kirkpatrick, he's paying for this. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll get the contact information for these guys. They're the best at what they do. They know what they're doing, and we just appreciate everything. So thank you, gentlemen, and
you.
thank you, Kelly, monitoring through the whole thing, and we will talk to you all soon, and I'll get this out to everybody, and thank you for your questions, and we'll make sure they're all answered, and so everybody can see what's going on. Thank you
Great.
all.
Thanks, Dan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks.